The message arrived at 2 in the morning, my time, on a phone that almost never rang that late. This is not a death notice. Nothing is broken. I received a Red Cross message informing me that my 6-year-old daughter's father had filed custody papers and that I had already been served 3 days earlier while I was out on convoy and unreachable. I stood outside the supply tent, my boots still laced from the mission, reading it twice, trying to understand how something this big could have happened to my family without me hearing a word about it first. I want to tell you who I was before that night. This is important for understanding what happened next. My name is Danny. By then, I had been in the Army for 11 years, working in logistics, a job that rarely appears in movies because it mainly involves spreadsheets, convoys, and ensuring that the correct pallet reaches the right location before someone downrange runs out of essential supplies. That was my thing. I had made my name as the person who didn't panic, who read the fine print, who saw a manifest that didn't add up before anyone else. I was, too, in that very moment, 8 months into a training rotation overseas, 3 time zones and 1 long flight away from my 6-year-old daughter Josie, who still slept with one leg hanging off the bed no matter how many times I tucked it back in before I left. Deployment has a weather system of its own. Some days it's just heat and paperwork and the low hum of generators, and other days a single email can knock the wind out of you standing up. I had learned to hold Josie's world small and steady in my head. Her cereal bowl with the chipped rim she wouldn't let my mother throw out, how she narrated her drawings aloud as she made them, and the stuffed rabbit that she had named Sergeant after me, badly, with a crooked felt patch sewn on by her. That was how I got through the long stretches without her, holding on to the little specific things. That message cut right through the middle of it all. Josie was staying with my mother Carol in Tennessee. This was the plan we'd had for years, not because Marcus, my husband, couldn't handle it, but because his job in commercial insurance had him traveling 3 weeks out of 4, and my mother lived 20 minutes from Josie's school. It had been fine for 2 deployments already. I never worried about it. I trusted my mother with Josie's mornings, her homework, and the small daily rhythm of a 6-year-old life more than I trusted anybody else in the world. Marcus and I were married for 8 years. We met in college, married young, and for a long time it was good, in the ordinary way most marriages are good. Not perfect, but solid. At first the cracks were small. He didn't receive a promotion he'd been counting on the same year I made Sergeant First Class, and something in him went quiet after that. The kind of quiet that doesn't announce itself. He never said he resented my career. He did not have to. I could feel it in the way he would introduce me at parties, as if my job were a fact about our family, not something I had earned. I could feel it in the way he would go silent for a day after one of my promotions, then go back to normal like nothing had happened. I remembered one particular night, the week I made Sergeant First Class, when he raised a glass at a work dinner for one of his colleagues who'd made regional manager, and toasted him with more warmth than he'd shown me in months. I said to myself that it didn't mean anything. I kept telling myself that for years. None of that explained a custody filing arriving on my doorstep from 6,000 miles away with no warning. The first calls after that message were cautious, the way conversations are when everyone's figuring out how much to say aloud. My mother's voice had a quality to it that I had never heard from her before, not once in 33 years. Marcus had taken Josie for a weekend a few weeks back, she said. Not unusual, except when he brought her home, he'd asked my mother an odd question. Whether anyone on my side of the family had red hair, going back a few generations. At the time, my mother had laughed it off with the kind of laugh one gives in response to a strange question from a weary son-in-law. She did not laugh when she mentioned that to me. During our next video call, I gingerly asked Josie about that weekend, being careful not to lead her and keeping my voice light, as I had learned to do over a decade of calls home. Daddy took me to my cousin Mabel's birthday party. There was a lovely lady who let me do a craft with a long cotton swab, like the kind at the doctor's office. Mabel did one too. It was amusing because neither of us liked how it felt inside our cheek, she told me. She thought it was a game. She giggled as she told me. She was 6, and I had no reason to think it was anything else. I made sure my face didn't change on the screen so she wouldn't change on it either. Not yet. I didn't think anything of it. I had troops under my command who required timely completion of tasks, and I felt a small, cold sensation in my gut that I dismissed as insignificant. Since then, I've learned to trust that feeling more than I did that week. Nothing. It ended the day I got an email forwarding me a name, Ted Pruitt. My mother had received a certified letter. It was a petition, not from Marcus himself, but from his attorney, requesting an emergency custody hearing on the grounds of what the paperwork called material misrepresentation of paternity. I read the line 4 times before it sank in. Marcus was arguing, in writing before a judge, that he had reason to believe he was not Josie's biological father, and that he had been deceived into raising her as such for 6 years. I sat with that thought in a supply closet that had been unofficially converted into the only place on base quiet enough for personal calls at odd hours. There's no way to say that sentence that isn't a direct accusation at me. I called Marcus first, before I called anyone else, because a part of me still wanted there to be a simple explanation. He didn't deny filing it. I had a private lab do a paternity test on a sample from Josie, he said, his voice so flat it hardly sounded like the man I married. And the result came back inconclusive enough that his lawyer told him to move quickly before I got back and, in Pruitt's words, had the chance to coach the child or destroy documentation. "How did you get a sample off Josie?" I asked. "It didn't matter, only that it existed," he said, "and if I had nothing to hide, I shouldn't be worried." I want to be honest about the next 10 minutes. It was not a calm period. I said things I'm not proud of. My voice got loud enough that a soldier walking past outside the closet door slowed down, then kept walking. But beneath the anger somewhere, the part of me that had spent 11 years learning to think clearly when everything else around me was on fire began to do what it did. Marcus was not a scientist. He was not a lawyer. Somebody had gotten to him, or maybe he'd talked himself into the situation. 8 years of quiet resentment finally finding a shape to hide behind. Either way, a claim based on a private lab and a birthday party wasn't going to pass scrutiny. But a real look takes time, and time was precisely what a filing like this was designed to take away from me. That night, I called my best friend from basic training, Ivy Reyes, the kind of friend you call at 2 in the morning without apologizing for it. Ivy was stateside, just a few hours' drive from my mother's house, and she possessed the one skill I needed most at that moment, the patience to go through paperwork that no one else wanted to read, line by line, rather than legal expertise. We'd been through worse nights than this, when we were 2 scared privates who didn't yet know how to ask for help. On the second ring, she answered, already awake, as if she'd been waiting for this kind of call. I told her all. The birthday party, swab, the word inconclusive, the file. She was silent for a moment on the line, and then asked the only question that really mattered. Who took that sample, and who signed for it at the lab? Ivy had spent 3 years working her way through evidence logs before she went to logistics, and she talked about chain of custody the way other people talked about recipes. Miss one step and everything after it goes to hell, no matter how excellent the rest looks. She said serious paternity disputes almost always require in-person, witnessed collection with ID. A private lab where a parent could take a sample on his or her own, at a birthday party, was not a legal grade test. It was a new result, dressed up to scare someone who didn't know any better. That question plagued me the rest of that night. A private DNA test is no magic. It has a paper trail, a collection form, a signature, a date, and a chain of custody, like recipes, and missed evidence that's ever mattered in a courtroom. If Marcus had done the test quietly, at a party, through a lab that didn't ask enough questions, that paper trail wouldn't hold up if someone actually pulled on it. It would fall apart in your hands. I thought about Josie doing a craft with a cotton swab at her cousin's birthday party, thinking it was a game, with 2 little girls close in date and age sitting at the same table with the same lovely lady passing out swabs like party favors. I thought about how easy it would be for someone who wasn't thinking straight, or thinking too straight, to end up with the wrong swab, or the right one on purpose, and let a stranger's lab do the rest without asking a single question that mattered. I didn't have any proof of that yet, just a feeling. This intuition was the kind of feeling that had never let me down in 11 years of logistics. Something was not right. The person filing it assumed that everyone lacked the time, access, or authority to verify the information. That night, I requested emergency leave. I didn't wait for approval to start working. I took everything I could get out of that supply closet. Josie's actual birth records from the hospital I delivered her at, my own medical file, anything with a real, verifiable chain of custody behind it, the kind of thing Marcus's backyard lab test would never have had. I duplicated everything twice, as they taught us to do for anything that was important. That night, I thought about calling my mother and telling her not to worry, but I didn't because I wasn't going to lie to her either. Instead, I gave her one piece of advice. Don't let Josie get anywhere near Marcus unless I'm there, and don't sign anything from Pruitt's office, no matter how urgent it sounds. I sent a single message to Ivy before closing my laptop. Not even a question this time. An order. The kind I'd give a soldier I trusted with something that really counted. Find out exactly where that sample originated and who signed for its receipt. I am going home. The emergency leave came through faster than I expected, which told me someone up the chain understood exactly what a custody filing built on a fraudulent faith DNA test could do to a soldier's family. Within 30 hours, I was on a transport, and by the time I landed stateside, Ivy had been busy. She met me at the airport instead of texting, and that told me she had something worth saying in person. I saw her before I even got to the gate doors, in her civvies still, holding 2 coffees she'd obviously bought an hour ago and forgotten about, both gone cold in her hands. She didn't hug me first. Instead, she handed me a folder, heavy with printed pages, with little sticky flags in 3 colors, just like she used to organize evidence logs back when that had been her job. It was Ivy's hug. She, quote, located the lab. It was a small operation 2 counties away, one of those places that promised results in 5 business days and didn't require an in-person appointment, just a mailed-in sample and a signed release form. She had requested the intake paperwork as a routine inquiry, and the collection date on file was almost the same as the weekend of Mabel's birthday party. The collector's line had a name, no name for the technician, Marcus. That information told me most of what I needed to know, but Ivy had one more thing. She had spoken with my sister-in-law, Dana, who had been the hostess of the party, and casually asked if anyone had done anything out of the ordinary with the kids that day. Dana remembered a woman in scrubs setting up a fun science craft table near the cake, right next to the backyard fence. She remembered it because her daughter Mabel had gone first, cried a little at the swab, and got a sticker for being brave. Josie had come right behind her, still looking at Mabel's sticker with envy, wanting one for herself more than she cared what the swab was really for. At the time, Dana didn't think anything of it. No one would have. A woman in scrubs at a kid's birthday party doesn't exactly sound like the beginning of a legal strategy. This situation resembles the type of entertainment typically found at a party, such as a face painter or a balloon animal artist. I asked Ivy the question I suspected. Was the swab labeled correctly and matched to the right child before it left the party? The intake form, Ivy said, had one child's name on it, Josie's, not Mabel's. This meant that either Marcus had properly taken a swab from Josie, resulting in a legitimate test, or he had mistakenly or intentionally taken a swab from Mabel and submitted it under Josie's name to ensure that the questions he wanted asked would actually be addressed. The next morning, I met with my attorney, Renata Cole, a woman who had handled 2 other cases like this for military families and didn't flinch at anything I told her, not even the part about the birthday party. She listened through the whole thing in one take without interruption, and then said the same words Ivy had used the night before: chain of custody. A test taken outside of a clinical setting by an interested party, mailed in without a witnessed collection or verified ID, wasn't going to hold up as reliable evidence in a custody proceeding, no matter what the lab's letterhead said. But she also told me something I hadn't wanted to hear. Marcus's filing didn't need to be perfect to inflict damage. It just had to be filed before I could answer and sound urgent enough that a judge, seeing an active-duty parent stationed overseas, might grant temporary orders in my absence just to be safe. What frightened me the most was the possibility of the system protecting the wrong parent. Not if the test was genuine. Maybe the system designed to protect kids from this very thing would, for a few weeks, protect the wrong parent simply because I appeared less present from a distance. That same day, Renata filed an emergency motion to move up the hearing and to allow me to appear in person, which I was, in fact, at that time, standing on American soil. She also asked for something Marcus's side clearly didn't see coming, a new paternity test, court-ordered, collected the same day at a certified lab, with both parents present and a full chain of custody documented from swab to result. In a written response, Ted Pruitt, Marcus's attorney, said the present test was adequate and that a new test was just a stalling strategy to buy time. Renata's response came in one sentence. If his client was happy with the result already obtained, a second test properly conducted should only confirm it, and there was no reasonable objection to more certainty in a case concerning a child's paternity. The judge concurred. 4 days later, the new test was ordered. That collection appointment was the first time I saw Marcus in 8 months. He looked thinner and worn out, in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He'd had his hair cut shorter than usual, like he used to do just before something stressful happened at work, an old habit I knew without wanting to. He wouldn't look me in the eye in the waiting room. His hands were folded in his lap, like a man waiting outside a principal's office, not a man about to learn if he was his daughter's father. I didn't try to get his attention. I had spent the flight home deciding that I was not going to give him the fight he seemed to want, only the truth, whatever that turned out to be. And there was one thing he told me before the technician called us back. He just had to know for sure, he said. I told him that he could have asked me that 8 months ago in a kitchen like a person who trusted his marriage, not behind my back in front of his niece at her birthday party while I was overseas. He didn't answer that one. I don't think he had a valid reason for his actions. The 4 days waiting for results were the longest days of my life. The 4 days I spent waiting for the results were the longest of my life, longer than any deployment stretch I'd endured, because at least during a deployment I knew what I was waiting for. It was as if someone had been waiting for a coin that was flipped a year ago, and no one had bothered to see how it fell until now. So the morning the results came in, before the official hearing, Renata called me because she wanted me prepared either way. I can remember exactly where I was standing when the phone rang. My mother's kitchen, one hand still on the coffee pot, hearing Josie's voice from the next room over a cartoon I wasn't really listening to. She read me the number first. Josie was Marcus's daughter. I knew the truth for 6 years. It was confirmed at a rate that left no room for argument. I exhaled, not knowing I'd been holding my breath since the flight home. Then she told me the second thing, the thing that made my hands shake for a different reason. The original private lab report on which Pruitt had based his case had been quietly reissued 2 days earlier, under a new tracking number, with a note buried deep in the file. Sample identity could not be independently verified because of a labeling discrepancy at intake. In plain English, that meant just what Ivy and I had figured out the first night. The sample Marcus sent in wasn't Josie's at all. It was Mabel's sample, which had been scrubbed clean after her and sent in under Josie's name to a lab that never once asked for verification, possibly due to a moment of confusion, expediency, or another reason I don't quite understand yet. The hearing was 3 days later, and Renata saw to it that Marcus's parents were there, for they had been quietly funding his legal fees and, I was to learn later, urging on the filing itself, persuaded that their son had been wronged. The courtroom was smaller than I'd thought, lit by fluorescence, the sort of room that makes everything said in it seem more permanent than it probably is. I watched their faces as Renata explained the timeline in simple terms. No theatrics, just documents in order. The birthday party, the wrong intake form, the quiet reissue, and the new court-ordered test naming Marcus, unambiguously, Josie's father. I saw the hand of Marcus's mother go to her mouth. I saw Marcus's father look at him and say nothing, a silence that conveyed more than any shouting could have. Marcus watched the table in front of him the whole time, his jaw locked, like a man watching some unscripted version of himself. Marcus did not argue with the new findings. He couldn't. His attorney asked for a recess, returned, and withdrew the custody filing altogether. The judge, before closing the hearing, noted for the record that the original test had been submitted without proper chain of custody, and suggested that the court look into whether the filing itself had been made in bad faith, a note that would follow Marcus into any future proceeding far more than it would ever follow me. Custody remained as it had always been, with both of us as parents, but new restrictions were placed on Marcus's unsupervised time until the court completed its review, along with a financial penalty for the cost of an emergency motion based on a test that he had known, or should have known, was not reliable. I didn't ask for anything else. I did not require witnessing his complete loss to feel that the truth had ultimately been revealed. There's a version of this story where I push harder, go for full custody, and make him pay in every way the court allows. I considered it. But Josie wanted a father more than I wanted total victory, and I had to be okay with that. Josie didn't really know most of the important details. Mommy surprised her by coming home early from her training, which was the best surprise of the whole year. Daddy began to pick her up on different days for a period of time, and she did not question it in the way that adults typically question things. 3 weeks after that, I was in Josie's room at 6 in the morning, tying on a new pair of sneakers for her first day of first grade, the laces still stiff and shiny, her rabbit named Sergeant propped against the pillow, watching us with his crooked felt patch. Thin stripes of sunlight were beginning to filter through the blinds across the carpet, and downstairs somewhere my mother was already running the coffee maker, the same sound that used to mean an ordinary morning back before any of the changes. Josie was talking a mile a minute about her teacher, her cubby, and whether her old friends would be in her class. Her conversation had nothing to do with birthday parties, lawyers, or lab results, because those concerns were no longer relevant. I double-knotted her laces in the way she liked, considering that she was old enough to insist she could do it herself now. And for once, she let me. I remember that morning more than I remember hearing. That felt like a win for me. His parents stopped paying for his legal bills when the review began. In a small town, news travels quickly. A filing like that doesn't stay quiet for long. If you had been in my shoes that night, reading words no parent should read from 6,000 miles away, what would you have done first? Call the lawyer. Or call your daughter? I have made a decision. I would make the dish again. If stories like this matter to you, stay tuned. The Long Memory has more of these, and I will be back with another one soon.